Hello and welcome to the Gut Health Testing webinar. We're going to talk through some real examples of the different types of testing and the steps in recovering from SIBO and other gut issues. I am going to record this, so I will share it with you at the tomorrow. And if you have any questions, you can just let me know at the end. I'll take us off record and I can answer them then one-to-one. Or with the group. So you can just raise your hand if you have a question, or you can put them into the chat. Through the presentation, I'll probably be letting people in to the meeting. So I will pause when I do that. But I'm keen to get started and not hold you for too long. It's doing something weird at the top of my screen, but hopefully it's okay for you. So how will this work? So this webinar is an overview of some of the practical steps that you take before testing. And then also we will look at the different types of tests and the best types of tests that might be available for you. I'll take you through some SIBO results and some microbiome testing as well. And then you can ask questions in the chat box as we go, and I'll answer them at the end of the session. Or if you want to join live, you can put your hand up using the little participant hand screen at the bottom, and I will allow you to unmute and we can have a chat then, but that will be off the recording. So first, I just wanted to make sure you're in the right place. So you're definitely in the right place if you've experienced gut issues that will not resolve and you have already tried the kind of basics that are always recommended before you do testing. So testing, I suppose, for me is used more often when there's something acute, like after food poisoning, or brand new symptoms that come out of nowhere and are really far advanced, or if symptoms won't resolve despite things like dietary changes, like your low FODMAP diets or Mediterranean diets, or other like elimination diets, or food sensitivities being removed. You've tried adding fiber and that hasn't helped your gut issues or has made things worse, which is quite common too. You've already implemented things like slow eating, mindful eating, and chewing, and that hasn't helped. And I suppose a really common one in IBS would be a recommendation around reducing stress, improving breathing, and also improving sleep. So during this webinar, you will find out a bit more about when to test, the appropriate tests to use based on your symptoms, and what to expect from gut health testing. And then I'll look at ways to move forward with testing and what happens after the test results come back. So basically with the when to test, if there is something acute or something new, looking at kind of the most appropriate test for you based on your symptoms, and then what to expect with gut health testing. So what kind of results you can expect to see. So I'll go through some of the sample tests there for that, and then how to move forward, like what ways because I suppose with gut health testing, it's just going to tell you what is wrong, but you also need to then resolve it so that you can get back to normal. So just to introduce myself, if you're not really familiar with me, I'm Claire and I'm a functional medicine trained naturopathic nutritionist and coach, which means that I work very hard to find the root cause of what's going on for you through health history and your symptoms and testing, and then translate that into actions that you can take in everyday life that is in accordance with your lifestyle, your food likes and dislikes, looking at things like supplementation to support you in getting back on track so that you can feel good inside and out. I spend a lot of time on the coaching side of things as well, because I understand that you're a real person in the real world with real responsibilities, and staying on track and staying motivated can be hard when you're might be in a very snowy day today and cold and you don't feel like cooking, or you've had a really bad day or a really good day and you want to go celebrate. It can be hard to stay on track long term. So I suppose from my side of things, I've worked with over 1,000 people with gut health issues, including myself. So I started with me and then did the training. So I did 3 years of training as a nutritional therapist. That was followed by an additional year as training in functional medicine. I then did some SIBO testing training and some SIBO training in general to specialize in that area. And then I've also done a year and a half of training and coaching, because I really recognize this, I suppose, throughout COVID, that it was really important that the coaching and the health coaching side of things, to make this like real and not magical or manifesting or unicorn thinking, with the science and the practicality, we need to keep you motivated on track for the long haul as well. So then I suppose, why is it important? So I see people every day who have bloating and gas and burping and limited diets and foods that they can't enjoy. And it doesn't just interfere with their enjoyment of food, but it impacts their social life, their family life, their work life, their dating life, how they feel about their body, their confidence and their energy. So I also get a lot of comments from people who do the testing or who work with me, who will come back then and say things like, oh my God, I didn't know that I felt so bad until I started feeling good again, or I never thought that I could feel good again. And I never realized how much I was avoiding meeting people. I have clients who have gone all day long at work without eating because they didn't want to have gas or bloating in front of other people, or had important meetings so would only survive on water for the whole day, or people who just would wait until they got home in the evening to eat because they didn't want to be bloated. And it was putting them off doing everyday things like going to the gym, because they felt like it was so visible that people might think that they were pregnant. So just to come back to some of the common causes of gut issues. So I highlighted earlier about chewing and excess air and irritation. Also, hormone imbalances can play a big role. Things like excess estrogen or production of progesterone have a big impact, because they can control your bile flow. Your thyroid hormones, if you have an underactive or overactive thyroid, that has an impact on how slowly or quickly you break down your food and can cause gut issues. You might have food sensitivities or intolerances. And then altered motility, things like blockages, low stomach acid. And one that I see a lot would be low calorie diets, where people are eating 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day, and it's just causing constipation because there's just not enough food. And of course, there are emotional and psychological factors associated with gut issues as well, like stress and anxiety and depression, being physically very busy, being physically very stressed, grief and low mood as well. But I suppose gut issues can also cause a lot of anxiety, sometimes depression and low mood, and can cause a lot of stress as well. So today we're just going to really focus in on the microbiome changes. So things like bacteria overgrowth and SIBO, and looking at things like pathogens and parasites and worms and thrush and all those lovely things. So if you have any questions, let me know. So when it comes to gut bacteria, it's really the good, the bad, and the misplaced. So we have good bacteria that help us break down our food and help us have healthy digestion. Sometimes we can lose those good bacteria through things like stress and antibiotics and medication. So we might be low in the basic things that we need, like lactobacillus and bifido, but they're so important in breaking down food and making them into good sized globules that our body can absorb nutrients from, can break down easily, and can excrete waste products from easily. Then we have the bad, so the ones that are infections, the ones that are causing things like diarrhea and constipation and abdominal pain, or they might be really acute in things like gastritis or stomach bugs, stomach flu, or things like food poisoning. And then we have the misplaced, which would be SIBO. So that would be things like bacteria growing in the small intestine or in the large intestine. But they don't belong there. They should be somewhere else in the digestive system. So starting off, I suppose, what is SIBO? So that is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, and it's the presence of excessive amounts of bacteria in the small intestine. And usually is a cause of IBS-like symptoms. So it's estimated that up to 80% of people with IBS actually have SIBO, and they feel like they have IBS, and they are told that they have IBS and that it's a long-term condition that they just have to put up with. But if it actually turns out to be SIBO, it's something that can be resolved, and you can actually feel so much better in a really short space of time. So some of the common causes of SIBO would be things like constipation or poor motility, where food gets stuck in different areas around the gut. So maybe, too fast or too slow through the stomach, eating too quickly, sticking around in the small or large intestine for too long, causing poor motility and fermentation. So you've got even healthy foods like oats and rice and things like that, causing a lot of gas and hard stomach and distension and problems. So we have food allergies and intolerances as well, low stomach acid and digestive enzymes. So things like taking a lot of medications, things like the oral contraceptive pill, Nexium, Buscopan, things like Rennies and Gaviscon over a long period of time. So they're not designed to be long-term medication, but managing symptoms with those, can reduce down our digestive enzymes and our stomach acid. And as I said, it can be that bile flow is compromised by our hormones as well. Other medications like antidepressants or long-term medications for blood pressure, they can impact on our motility and cause SIBO too. Impacted intestinal flow, where there's physical blockages that are stopping us from having proper intestinal flow. So we get either constipation or constipation with overflow or diarrhea. Stress would be another big one, but that can be physical as well as emotional, and infection, like I mentioned already. So the symptoms of SIBO are diarrhea and constipation, bloating, brain fog, fatigue, anxiety, skin rashes, pain in the intestine, particularly when you're going to the toilet, or right-sided pain, or pain under the ribs. And then mid-back pain, so along the bra line, will be a common symptom of SIBO as well. And sometimes you'll get shoulder pain on the left-hand side or right-hand side, and that would be connected to the gallbladder, particularly on the left side. But in any kind of gut infection, you're going to see more like shoulder, neck, and head pain. So tight muscles around the jaw as well, because it's constantly sending a signal to your brain to say that you're under attack, that your stomach is under attack, and that there's something invading and it's not happy with it. And that puts you into a state of fight or flight. And that state of fight or flight causes your muscles to be switched on and for your blood pressure to go up. And you can end up feeling very tired and wired, which can lead to brain fog and fatigue, and also anxiety. So just to have a look through some of the SIBO presentations. So this one is SIBO that is hydrogen-based. So this is a hydrogen gas, which would have like an eggy smelling gas, and is probably the most common type of SIBO. So here is an example of what a breath test result would look like. This one was done using lactulose. You can also use glucose if somebody is under the age of 12, or if somebody is lactose intolerant and can't tolerate even the slightest bit of lactulose, even though lactulose is often used as a constipation reliever. Some people do have a bad reaction to lactulose. So you basically would drink a lactulose formula, and then your breath would be measured for reaction to hydrogen and methane for 90 minutes afterwards. So hydrogen-based SIBO usually presents with diarrhea or mixed constipation and diarrhea. There's a lot of bloating and distension, brain fog, that kind of smelly gas or excess gas, and bloating that happens from morning to night. Doesn't really matter what you eat, you still get bloated. And sometimes, eating McDonald's can make the symptoms less bad than eating things like salad. So that's a big sign if fiber is causing issue, then maybe SIBO is involved. You might also see skin rashes and redness and have histamine sensitivity or histamine responses. So where you have that kind of prickly nettle rash, or where you have postnasal drip, or feels like you have hay fever or clogged sinuses all the time, that would be common in hydrogen SIBO. So the way that SIBO is measured is after about, they start collecting straight away, but we're looking for a rise of 10 parts per million within 60 minutes. In Europe, that's our standard. In the US, the standard, if you're reading anything about SIBO online, would be a rise of 20 parts per million within 90 minutes. So we see that this test shows both are the case. But we will look at the SIBO test for both, because sometimes it doesn't rise within the 60 minutes, but will rise within the 90, and that's still indicating hydrogen SIBO. Sometimes it's not as dramatic as this. And the other line, the orange line here, is methane. So I'm going to just talk you through what a methane test would look like. So when you have methane SIBO, it's often referred to as intestinal methane overgrowth. It can be lower down as well, so it can be in the large intestine when it's methane SIBO, rather than in the small intestine when it's hydrogen SIBO. Methane SIBO is more associated with constipation than with diarrhea, although you can have both again. Bloating and abdominal pain as well would be common, but I suppose what sets it apart would be common bad breath. So feeling like, even if you've just brushed your teeth, you still have bad breath, and that it's coming up from your stomach. Headaches and migraines would also be really common in methane SIBO and not so common in the other forms of SIBO. Joint pain, brain fog, abdominal pain, and bloating would be common across all types. So in this one, it's glucose consumption, and then you see the rise of the methane within the 90-minute mark, but the hydrogen remains normal. Now, both of these are showing separate tests for hydrogen and methane being positive, but people do have both hydrogen and methane SIBO. So they have both types of bacteria in their intestines overgrowing. So they might have small intestinal bacteria that is hydrogen positive, and then lower down in their large intestine, they'll have the methane overgrowth as well. And that's not as unusual as you might think. People do have both, and it does take a lot of extra effort on their part to kind of clean up both parts, and then it does really signify that there's an underlying cause. This probably wouldn't have happened just as a result of a stomach bug or picking up food poisoning, or things like infected water or agricultural runoff. That's usually something that's been around for a long time. There is such a thing as fungal overgrowth as well. So you can have small intestine fungal overgrowth, which can be tested for as well. That is easier to resolve with antifungals, particularly with herbal antifungals. And then finally, the last type would be the hydrogen sulfide type of SIBO. And this is particularly nasty because it shows up as a flat line. And often you'll get a report that says you're SIBO negative or you're IMO negative, but actually this flat line means that you are hydrogen sulfide positive. And what is happening here is that the methane and the hydrogen have been siphoned off by the sulfur producing bacteria. So it's completely flat. You get a lot of really pungent eggy gas. diarrhea, histamine sensitivity, and this one's pretty nasty because it can cause depression and a lot of anxiety as well. You'll often see people with reflux and vomiting, which wouldn't be as usual in the other forms. And then sulfur sensitivity is a big giveaway for this one. So sulfur foods like broccoli, like eggs, like wine, really setting off your stomach and causing it a lot of pain. That would be a sign of sulfur sensitivity. Red meat and bacon and anything containing sulfites would set it off. And then histamine sensitivity would be another big sign that it could be hydrogen sulfide SIBO, that prickly rash, that pain alongside it, and just feeling like you can't breathe, or that your nose is constantly running, or that you react to every food under the sun. And that would be another sign of hydrogen SIBO. So I wanted to show you the 3 different types because it's one test. It's easy to do. Once we know what's happening and what's going on in your gut, it gives you loads of options for treatment, and the resolution is really quick. So you could have this for 15, 20 years and it won't go away by itself. But once you start the treatment, it can be gone within a couple of weeks. And the treatment options would be things like a combination of antibiotics, diet, and supplements like herbs to help you to break down and kill off the SIBO causing bacteria. You can also just do herbs because the antibiotics by themselves have only a 50% success rate. So the dietary interventions, things like a low sulfur or low FODMAP diet can work for hydrogen sulfide. You can use an elemental diet or a biphasic diet for the other types of SIBO. The elemental diet is really great, but it's based on a lot of shakes, so like smoothie types of drinks that you sip slowly that are full of protein and fiber and nutrients, and that give you your calories alongside things like fish and chicken and vegetables, through like a course of 5 to 10 days. For as long as you can last on the diet, the easier it is to complete and resolve the symptoms without having to use antibiotics at all. And then after that, once the SIBO is gone, it's just a maintenance diet of really slowly introducing foods back into your diet so that there isn't any kind of strong reaction from your gut. And then just making sure that you can tolerate all the foods really well. And you might need to take some antimicrobials like garlic every day for a few months to stop it from boomeranging back, because I suppose that's the real problem with SIBO. If you don't get to the underlying cause, it can come back again, and you have to go back through the testing and the resolution kind of phase, which can be really frustrating and very hard on yourself mentally. But most of the time with a maintenance diet and herbs in the first couple of months, we can stop it from boomeranging back, and then you won't have SIBO again. Or if we resolve the root cause, it won't come back at all. So moving on from SIBO, there's lots of other nasty things that can live in your gut that have nothing to do with bacteria. There's lots of things that can happen. And I'm hoping that you can see this clearly enough. So you might let me know in the chat if you can. Unfortunately, I can't seem to see the chat or anything at the moment while I'm screen sharing. My screen is blank, but I will come back and check on it in a little while. So the first thing that can happen is maldigestion. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. So when you don't have enough digestive enzymes to break down your food properly, maybe you have too much fecal fat, so too much fat in your stool, and it sticks and stains the bowl because you're not digesting fat properly. Or maybe you're not breaking down proteins properly because your stomach acid is low, or you don't have enough variety of probiotics like in your diet, or maybe you're lacking in some other areas in it, like things like acidity, if you've been taking medications for a long time. The second thing that this particular test looks at, and I suppose there's lots of different testing options. I've chosen this one because it's the most visual, so I'm hoping you can really see it quite easily. So the inflammation markers would be the next one that you can look at in a stool test. So looking at things like calprotectin and blood in the stool and secretory IgA, where we're looking at like your immune function and the inflammation in your gut. So how healthy is the lining of your gut? And is there any big things going on like diverticulitis or Crohn's or celiac disease or any of those kind of immune associated diseases? Or is there, an issue with the quality of the stomach lining? Then, of course, there's the dysbiosis. So how much bacteria are in your gut, the good and the bad, and if there's any other kind of imbalances there. So we look at those things like candida, like thrush. Is there any yeast there living off you? Is there methane or SIBO? So we can test in a stool test for SIBO as well. And then we're looking at like metabolic imbalance. So how good are your bacteria at creating things like your vitamin D, like being able to break down foods and create like vitamin A? How good is it at creating butyrate to keep you healthy, or short chain fatty acids to keep you going to the toilet regularly? And then the kind of other marker here is beta glucuronidase, which you probably haven't heard of, but is really important for us as women. When we have estrogen and we have our cycle, we want there to be, a healthy but not overgrowing level of beta glucuronidase, so that our estrogen is able to leave our body and not recirculate and cause things like sore boobs or heavy periods. So it's important to know about that as well. So that allows us to check on whether there's like a hormonal component to what's going on in your gut. And then finally, we're looking at infection. So the really nasty bugs like the blastocysts and the Campylobacter and the C. diff that make you really ill, or the parasites and worms and protozoa that can be in your gut that live off you and steal your energy and steal all your vitamins and make you feel really flat and tired. So this particular test looks at where you are compared to everybody else who's done this test. So how healthy is your gut on average? And then how much bacteria do you have in your gut compared to the average healthy person? So here we have a breakdown of what that looks like in terms of cholesterol, triglycerides, your digestive enzymes, your inflammation, your markers for disease as well, like autoimmune disease. And then it looks at your healthy bacteria as well, because that's really important. I see a lot of people who've taken neem or berberine thinking they had a bacteria overgrowth, but actually they had an undergrowth of lactobacillus or E. coli or some other healthy bacteria. And they've accidentally gotten rid of all of those good bacteria and just replacing those with like a good probiotic and prebiotic foods is all they need to be healthy. And then, so that's a little bit more about like the levels in comparison, and you'll see things like no growth, or maybe one will be +4 and the others are +2, and you just don't have the right balance. And it also looks at thrush. So it looks at the different types of strains of Candida, because there are many strains of Candida, and things like diflucan and canesten can only kill certain strains. So you might need to use herbs to kill off the more rare ones. So that's important too. Then on the other side, we have things like worms, tapeworms, flukes, protozoa. So blastocysts would be really common. I see that a lot. And I also see Cryptosporidium, Klebsiella, Giardia, all as infections in people's gut in Ireland, where they've picked it up in Ireland. And those guys in the protozoa category really do need antibiotic assistance. So in that case, I'd be writing a letter to your GP asking for them to treat you for that. Whereas things like worms and flukes, we can get over-the-counter medication, or we can use herbs to get rid of those. Then we want to look at things like, why are they surviving in your gut? How come you don't have enough stomach acid or the right pH to kill them off, that they were able to live there off you for that long? So, sometimes that can be stress related or illness related, where you pick up a bacteria and a worm at the same time, for example. Or, a lot of people will have pets, and they can pick it up from their pets as well. And then I suppose in this one, there's a lot of add-ons that you can buy, but these can be standard in a lot of tests. So there is another test called GI Map that is slightly cheaper actually than this one, but less visually able to explain. And they do things like the add-ons for H. pylori as standard. And they will also include things like the Shiga toxin for the E. coli that causes food poisoning as standard too. But there's lots of add-ons that you can get, and they'll do a deeper exam for parasites too. So the parasitology will give you how much of each of the parasites are there, or the protozoa are there, to see how severe it is and what type it is, so that we can treat it as best as we possibly can. And the last bit of this one was the fecal blood and the zonulin, to look for any kind of more serious issues going on in your gut. So then after the test results, it's about putting the pieces together. So you've done the functional testing, you know what's wrong. And sometimes that can be a huge relief in itself, just knowing that there is something wrong and knowing what that something wrong is. You could also do food intolerance testing, which I'm happy to talk about once we've stopped recording, because it's not part of this presentation. The next step then would be dietary changes, looking at appropriate changes in your diet to support your recovery, to give you the energy, to make sure that you're feeding you and not the candida, to make sure that you have, the right diet. Say if you're looking at SIBO, is it a Mediterranean, a low FODMAP, a biphasic, an elemental? What kind of diet is the most appropriate? Then looking at the building blocks of making sure you've got good motility and that there's good gut support there, that they're, addressing any deficiencies, which would be common when you've got something living in your gut for a long time. And then looking at lifestyle factors like sleep and breathing, like movement, relaxation, connection, because connection can be so easily lost when you have a long-term gut problem. It's so hard to keep on going outside or meeting people for lunches and dinners and things like that when it's going to bloat you and you're going to feel really sick, or if you're very self-conscious. So it's building all those pieces back up and putting them together so that you feel nice and healthy and vibrant, and not worried about all of these gut issues anymore, not worrying about the bloating, not having second wardrobes or any of those things going on in your life, and having that lovely new energy and being able to put it into things that make you feel good. And I suppose that's where the coaching aspect of things also comes in. So the nice good side on the other side of testing. So I suppose if this does sound like something that you have a need for and you have questions, or you want to go ahead with things like testing, I wanted to just talk through a few options that I can help you with. So first of all, I suppose you can do the SIBO testing directly with me, or I can refer you to GastroLife, or you can self-refer to GastroLife. So GastroLife are a clinic based in Ireland. They're based in Kildare. They have a site in Galway and they have one in Dublin as well. You can do it in person with them for about €185, and they'll tell you on the day whether you have SIBO or not. They'll also, if you tell them that I send you, they will send me a copy of the report so that we can take it from there. And sometimes it will be completely flatline and that will mean hydrogen SIBO and that won't come up on that test. But there are other SIBO tests available that I can send directly to you. You can do it from home as well. So if you're doing it from home, you have the choice of the lactose or the glucose as well. So anybody with diabetes, for example, or gestational diabetes wouldn't be able to do the glucose test. The bacteria testing, I showed you the Genova example, but there's loads of others on the market. So each, whether it's bacteria or it's, flukes or protozoa, or you're worried about candida, there's lots of different panels to put together. So that ranges from €150 right up to 450 or 400. But through me directly, I can order them on your behalf with 20% off the listed price. With the bacteria testing through me directly, I will go through the results with you and the next steps. You also have the option of doing them yourself and coming to me with the test results. So I do packages of consultations, so 2 one-to-one consultations for €150. And I also offer a testing package with any of the tests, the SIBO or the bacteria tests, plus 3 consultations over 8 weeks support for €600. So if you are going through, say, the elemental diet or SIBO, I will need to contact you multiple times a week over that 8-week period. So while it might be 3 calls, I will be talking to you nonstop on either WhatsApp or email or text to support you the whole way through that, so you're not on your own. So the next step, I suppose, again, would be to either book a discovery call if I've sparked interest in something or something resonated with you and you're wondering what to do next. You can book online that discovery call, which is free and is usually around 20 minutes. Or you can send me an email if you need to go ahead faster, or you want to have a chat with me, or you know exactly what test you want to do and you just want to get going. So you can email me at claire@honestgoodness.ie.